So thank you everyone for being with me, everybody for being with me online, and everybody for being with me here. Thank you all so much. And what I'm going to do is start with a little prayer of gratitude, and then we'll do what is energy healing in a minute, like a little description, and then we'll dive into today's session. We've got some really interesting questions. Thank you to being, for everything, for this live webinar, for all the forms of consciousness that heal, and for all the forms of consciousness, the great eternal tradition of wisdom, which supports the flow of knowledge. Thank you to everyone's ancestors. Thank you to the divine in all of us for blessing our time together with the ability to work concisely and efficiently, and to bring out the highest and most powerful, useful information and technologies for applying energy healing on a practical level. Thank you always to support everyone's ability to become self-sufficient, self-sustaining, and to master the energy healing process. May you all be great, great energy healers. Thank you. All right. So energy healing in a nutshell is it's a healing form that uses awareness or attention as the healing modality itself. So instead of you're accustomed to Western medicine where if you go to a doctor, a lot of times you get prescribed a prescription, right? You get prescribed some pharmaceutical product or surgery or something like that. In energy healing, we're using consciousness as the medicine. Consciousness is the medicine. And that's not to say that sometimes other modalities are useful and valuable, but the energy healing process enhances and supports the effectiveness of any modality that you use. So we have a model of reality that ranges from the fleshy material body to the source of everything in creation, the field of absolute pure consciousness. And energy healing is a process, what I'm presenting here is a way of going into detail regarding the mechanics and the features of the area between the pure consciousness, silent, unmanifest, quality-less level of being and the physical material level of being. Because if at the physical level we've got a symptom or a problem, then the principle is that we need to get the solution to that problem, and the source of creation has all the solutions. It has the original blueprint of the body. It has everything that is needed, all the energy, all the resource, all the structuring principles, everything required to reform the physiology in a way so that it's feeling good. So the area between absolute being and the physiology is the area where the magic comes in. That's the area where understanding and appreciating how to focus attention in a very concise manner, like the science of it, that's what makes the difference between kind of just randomly attempting to make some changes and actually getting positive, solid results. And if you're focusing attention in a very intelligent manner and feeling like you're not getting solid results, then it just means a deeper dive is required. So the deep dive references, I think, of one of the most important principles of energy healing, which is the use of speech in order to define and enhance the clarity of the structure between being and the physiology. Because speech is one of, I would say, a divine tool. Speech is a divine tool for creating order out of chaos. And so it's easy enough to see the order at the physical material level. And for those who are very comfortable diving into the field of silence, that's a piece of cake. But the mechanics of how the silence manifests to the surface. That's where the key resides for restructuring situations and circumstances on the surface which are not satisfying. All right, so today's session, I hope that helps for everybody. I've got some great questions, as I said, some cool questions coming up. And I also have, oh, here. Today's session is called Energy Healing for Relationships. So we're looking at this basically in terms of relationships. Basically, last night we talked a lot about relationships with other people, because those are the first level of relationships that we're used to experiencing. Relationship with mother is like primary, first relationship. And just as a little recap from yesterday, because I want to, for those who weren't with me, just to stabilize. So this first relationship, that relationship with mother, is also evident in the gap if we're looking at the range from dense physiology down to the field of unmanifest being. What we find is there are these layers of density, and at the deepest level, the level of being, unmanifest, unqualityless being, there are two values. There's silence folded in on its own nature, sort of asleep within itself, folded into itself, and then there's silence which is awake to its own reality. It's awakened to its existence. And between silence resting and silence dynamic is a very significant gap with regards to the energy healing process, because right in that gap are all the resources that we harness to create positive effects, or we could say evolutionary transformation and the relative level. And the feeling in the gap, the feel of the gap, is mother is at home. That's that feeling of complete satisfaction, complete resource, complete love, unconditional love, all that richness and warmth. And only in the unmanifest level of creation, which is absolute, can you have absolutely soft, warm, sweet, loving, yummy quality of being, right? Because as soon as the symmetry breaks, as soon as the manifested level starts to come forward, then we start to get the x-axis opens up, and that's that way of measuring the infinite ocean of consciousness between the complementary pairs of opposites. As soon as the symmetry breaks, complementary pairs of opposites appear. So another thing we did yesterday is we did a pretty deep dive and a lot of looking into the causal level of the physiology, which is the finest relative level of the physiology, and exploring sacred gardens of the heart and other causal locations which have a significant, I would say have significance with regards to the ability to structure what you want. And on that note, I think I'd like to make just another little addendum, and that is that, like as in a Stapati house, each of those areas has its own laws of nature, and that each area oversees some specific area of life. Like there's a whole area just for relationships, and we can break that into smaller segments, like my relationship with my child, and my relationship with my mother, or my relationship with my teacher, or my relationship with my student, or whatever. And then within that context, there's a range from more dense to more, or I should say from larger to smaller. So that's yet another axis, right? And everybody knows I uploaded the video about axes on Thursday. So you can review that if you want. I want to use our time today to get as much healing in as possible. And some of you have been with me for a long time. You're pretty familiar with the axes. So anyway, axis from large to small also plays in at this level, because in the relationship area at the finest level of manifestation, we get archetypal relationships, and we get a chance to appreciate and experience ideal relationships, because in their archetypal form, they tend to, a lot of the archetypal forms start out with the ideal. And then what happens is, and that's like at this larger than the largest, smaller than the smallest axis, as we go to smaller and smaller and smaller, we find that there are little anomalies that creep into relationships. However, in everyone's sacred garden of the heart, there is no separation between you and your loved one. So that love, that beautiful love, is a form of divinity loving itself. It's the one being loving itself through two souls or through two physiologies. One being, two physiologies, but really one being. And both individuals in that sacred space experience themselves as one being. That's why if there's a conflict with anyone, it's a beautiful way to deal with the conflict by going to that sacred inner space where you are one with that other person. And at that level, there's nothing to hide. It's only truth flows, only authentic, genuine flow of feeling is there. And so the problems that often crop up in relationships are a byproduct of miscommunication, incompletions of various types. You know, maybe someone has an expectation, oh, I thought it was going to go this way, but then it didn't, like that. So it's an area where wholeness is created. Basically what we do karmically when we have a dear friendship or a dear relationship is we choose to enter into a space where we are one with that other person in that sacred garden of the heart area. And it's beautiful to see, how am I when I'm enhanced by my connection with this other person? What wholenesses do we create together? Beautiful. Anyway, so I guess that's the recap of yesterday. Even though it's kind of different from what I said yesterday. But anyway, that's for people who are here twice. Then you get it both from two different directions. Okay. And on that note, I have couple of really awesome questions, and I think maybe some questions are coming in up here too. And everybody will notice you have in your upper left-hand corner, you have both a chat option and a question and answer option. Oh, hello. And I just want everyone to know that it probably works better for me if we all go on the same one. Otherwise, I've got two different boxes that I've got to open. So I'm wondering if people would be nice enough to just ask questions and make comments on the question. If you have questions, just do them on the question and answer box. Is that okay? Thank you. I appreciate it. All right. So last night, one lady asked the question, sometimes low self-esteem and the need for approval both contribute to unhealthy relationships. And so how can these energy patterns be most gracefully dissolved? And we did a healing at that time, but I didn't address how to resolve that if you're dealing with somebody else who has low self-esteem. Maybe your self-esteem is fine, but the other person not so fine. And at the same time that I'm introducing this question, I'm also doing a little check-in with the energy field of our whole group, which I have been doing all along. But I want to see if this is a good time for a healing for all of us too. And last night when I checked in, there was such a feeling of excitement and enthusiasm. Oh, it's healing time. And this morning, today there's like a little more delicacy, I would say, in the air. And what I'm feeling in everybody is higher quotient of sort of sensitivity in the hearts, higher amount of sensitivity in the channels of awareness. So I'm feeling as if everybody's like a little bit more on as far as their inner awakeness. The hearts are more awake, but they're also functioning more delicately. And the field of awareness is more awake. And one of the things I'm seeing is a lot of everybody in the group is able to look out into the energy field. I'm looking into the energy field, but you're looking into the energy field too. And so we're all seeing it from our own slightly different perspectives and angles, which is delightful. Talk about yummy. It's delicious. It's delightful. So looking at that. And the first thing that I'm feeling is that the amount of conscious awareness that's moving from our collective out into the web of life is causing a little ripple of purification in the field of creation that's around our energy center, the energy center of our webinar. So that's always super beautiful and blessed. It's like, thank you. It's precious when there can be some soft releasing of expectations, assumptions, judgments, releasing. I'm seeing the purification taking place in the field is also affecting some belief systems. So this is inside and outside our collective, but particularly affecting ancestors. And this is a great support for the ancestors to be able to move with us as we do the delicate work required to continue the opening up, the clear communication channels between the relative level of self and the subtle level of self. I'm feeling that some of the ancestors particularly feel quite vulnerable, feeling some vulnerability in the collective field and delicacy. So the way we meet that situation, these are the inner mechanics, and this is a relationship, right? Because we have a relationship with our ancestors, even if they're not in the body. That question we covered last night. Is that vulnerability is a structure at the emotional level of the physiology. So from dense to subtle, it's at an emotional level. But so here's the dun 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 emotional level. But then on this axis, on the x-axis, which is the axis of complementary opposites, the feeling of vulnerability, and also I'm feeling with them, I'm just defining it, not worthiness, lack of self-confidence. This is an emotion which sits on the axis of complementary opposites. It's a little more on the dense side, right? It's a little bit more on the not happy side. We can call it dark and light, or we can call it destructive laws of nature and constructive laws of nature, however we want to define that axis. But it's right there. And so I'm just feeling that. And I'm feeling that's in their hearts. I'm feeling it in the heart area. I'm feeling it in the solar plexus area. I need to talk about how I'm feeling that, although I've talked about that somewhat on other webinars. That is part of the process when we're working with, this is us working in the field of relationship, right? So what's happening is our physiologies become a mirror for those physiologies, a mirror for the collective field. And so it's not that you take on the anomaly or the imbalance or the incompletion, it's that you just can see it. Because the beauty, part of the beauty of the nature of having a human physiology is we have these highly intelligent, amazing, wise, anciently wise structures that we get to move around in as our vehicle, as the vehicle for the divine to experience life. And they have the ability to reflect. So there we're going to work with the solar plexus area and the heart area. And it looks like always when we're working with the heart area, we're also cluing in a little bit to the Hriddya Mahamarma, which is that sort of like a bigger heart chakra, right? So there's like the regular heart chakra, and then there's the Mahamarma, which ranges from the fifth throat area down to the solar plexus area. And what our collective is able to do, and we can do this when we do healing in a collective, which is so beautiful, is that we can provide a level of resource because we're like a tribe, we're like a family or a group, and our collective intelligence, the collective of our consciousness can provide the antidotes to feeling vulnerable or unworthy or incapable or whatever. So there's elements of strength come to meet that. We're positioning our awareness right in the center of the axis of complementary opposites, right? Because when we're positioned in the middle, then that naturally supports the manifestation of the precise complementary opposites, because each ancestor has their own little unique mix of what they're feeling. Where are they positioned on that x-axis? Where's their uncomfortable spot, you could say. So each one different. So with our holding a kind of holy sacred balance also stabilizes the experience of unmanifest, quality-less wholeness or totality in the nervous system, because that field, that unified field of all the laws of nature, is super symmetrical. So when we're in a state of balance, we're aligned with supersymmetry. And what that does is it brings up the bliss. It brings up the creative, exquisite antidotes to the, in some cases, shame that the ancestors are feeling. There's a whole mix of different, they've got discordant feelings, they've got beliefs that are in there. There are, I know for a lot of them, there's an experience of self-identity, and that goes very closely with the low self-esteem and the need for approval. Those are intimately connected to people thinking of themselves in a specific manner, which is like not good enough. And you know they're using their speech, right? They're using their, at least their inner speech, their thought of, oh, well, I'm not good enough. They think it. They think, oh, well, you know, nobody cares. Nobody knows, nobody cares, nobody knows what my situation, how hard it is for me, that kind of thing. And so as the complementary pairs of opposites start pairing up and creating wholeness, and we're anchoring the wholeness with our point of balance, then a movement occurs at an emotional level in the physiologies. And some of you may be experiencing that reflected in your physiology. I'm certainly feeling it's like a kind of a almost cathartic sort of release of discordant feelings from the physiology. And so beautiful. It's so, when there's, and I say it's so beautiful like that because the answers are like, oh, please excuse me. Oh, I'm so sorry. Like, but the thing is, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. It's beautiful when the transformation occurs, and the transformation is really a transformation of self-identity, because there's that sense of like I'm worthless, or I'm not good enough, or I don't like myself, or whatever. And that gets dislodged by the movement of the emotions as they're starting to purify out of the system. And as that dislodges, all those sense of self breaks down, and there's a kind of a, this is why the strength element and why our anchoring ability is so valuable right here, because we can hold the whole system steady while that old sense of self breaks down and dissolves, so that the new sense of identifying one's being with being, identifying oneself with their own divinity, can stabilize up. After all, no matter what breaks down, no matter what destroys, no matter what destructive laws of nature come, being is never lost. So that forms the seed of the next manifestation, of course, which is this sense of self, of like, I can do this. I have support of my offspring. I have support of my descendants. And what that does for us, because our amazing bodies are their gift to us. It's all just made of ancestor stuff. So what it does is it uplifts our physiologies from a molecular level, from the DNA level. That's where the ancestors are, molecular. And of course, that leads into another question, another extremely super cool question here, which is about eating and food. And I see some more good questions are coming in over here on the question answer. Thank you, everyone. So I'm going to do this one on eating, and then we'll go to the questions that are up here on the screen. They're coming in from the video, from the internet. So it says, can you comment on the relationship with our food? That means, and so that's also a relationship, right? Like we have relationships with people, but we have relationships with stuff. Like my computer was so finicky this week. Tom and I, yesterday it crashed like at least once. It crashed once yesterday. And I was like, what if it, you know, we hope it doesn't crash during the webinar. That would be a catastrophe, but no, the computer's good computer. The computer's doing what it's supposed to do. So we have relationships with things as well. As you have all figured out, I have a relationship with jewelry. It's right. It's a relationship. Like, I don't do a video without putting on some jewelry, you know. But and that relationship, my experience with that relationship is absolutely an energetic relationship. In other words, there's a Sanskrit word for jewelry, which is alankara, and alankara means to make sufficient. And the physiology is the home of the soul, but the soul has it's the dense home. But the being within, the resider within, the indweller of the physiology is also celestial, it's also divine. And so it's lovely to put on things that sparkle, because the sparkles represent that finer, less manifest level of self. And so it brings the physiology up a notch. I'm really thinking it because the prom is tonight. And my 16-year-old is like, oh, sorry, I can't bring her in on this. You guys would get a feast for the eyes there. But anyway, that's another. Oh, thank you. Thank you, darling. So, all right. So yeah, this question about food and eating is that what this man is saying is he has this experience that when he eats, he discovered that he could mix his love. When the food is in the mouth, he can mix love with the food. And that when he did that, when he does that while he's chewing, he says, this gives me a wonderful, new, profound experience of eating, which is lovely, because the whole reason that we're human and that we're in our human bodies is so that we can enjoy the human experience, a relative. Divinity can enjoy a relative experience. So he said, and then he also mentioned he likes to read Sanskrit, and that he also sends love to each Sanskrit letter when he reads Sanskrit, and while reading and reciting it. He feels he has an actual relationship with the letters while reading. Wow. That just makes me think I'm wasting my time having a relationship with jewelry. I should have a relationship with Sanskrit, right? Because Sanskrit is known as Devanagari, and the word Deva means the gods, and Nagari means the home. So Sanskrit, even the shapes of the letters are considered to be like the home of the gods, which, like, that's a relationship worth cultivating, right? Okay, so there's this situation that there are two different directions that we can flow energy through the main energy centers up and down the body, and one is up and one is down. And so what happens if you choose to give love, if you choose to chew with love, then the heart energy, the love originates and centers at the heart. So that energy moves up and it goes up into the mouth like that. And that movement up is associated with the flow of divinity from unmanifest to manifest. And I say that because the Shiro Mahamarma, the head Mahamarma, as I've mentioned before, I think I've got a video on Mahamarmas, you can check on this, is about all the structures that orient us toward the relative. Our eyes, our ears, our nose, our mouth, the different cortices of the brain orient to the relative. The prefrontal cortex analyzes and synthesizes all that information. So this whole area is like toward the relative. Whereas all the intelligence of the gut, and that's like, would be a third of the neural connections in the body are actually in the gut, right? Because the gut has half as many neural connections as the brain. So that's a lot of thinking going on down there, and all that thinking orients, there's no senses, there are no like gross senses, it orients awareness toward the relative. So the heart energy, as it moves up, the body is orienting towards the relative. So what that means is when we're chewing our food lovingly, then we are manifesting love in the material that's going to be broken down and go back. It goes down, then the food goes down, right? And as it goes down into the deeper levels of the body, it's restructured back into consciousness. And from consciousness, it becomes transmuted into the physiology again. So I think it's a beautiful experience, chewing lovingly. You choose to chew. You can choose how you chew, and you may as well chew lovingly. We may as well. Since it's so easy, right? So there's the flow up and the flow down, one flow in the direction of greater manifestation, one flow in the direction of less concrete, more refined. And I think we talked last time about how the fundamental of all food is cosmic intelligence anyway, because that's what the food is literally physically made of. When we make food out of photons, photons into plants makes photons are storehouses or archives of cosmic information. They've been around a long time, a lot longer than our food, a lot longer than us. Physiologies. Okay, so we talked about that. I made some notes. Okay. So the only other thing that I have here on my notes that I think I'd like to touch on, then I would like to go to other questions, is that I'd like to touch on this point that all this flow, like the eating of food, for example, is the one being of all creation, self-interacting. And within the causal body, we talked about sacred realms of creation where we have relationships. Probably the most important relationship in all of our selves and all of our being is our relationship with our own divine, with divinity itself, with being. And so at a very, very delicate, very fine level of the physiology, all of us have a structure like you can think of it like an organ in the causal body, which is responsible for the integration of the individual with the collective or with universal being. And there are three strokes in there. There's the stroke of the flow of your love to God, the flow of God's love to you, and then that organizing principle that handles the balance. It handles the coordination. And so I'm just checking on that with everybody in the group. And I'm just feeling my way in here. There's a spot that's a little bit tender. There's a tender spot for some people, and that's okay. I'm just looking at it. And I need to, my job is to use my divine speech to clearly articulate what is happening there. But I'm feeling it right now it's very, very abstract. But okay, so now it's starting to come in. So there are layers of frustration, disappointment. This is the marriage. This is the marriage of dealing with chaos and then having a good solid dose of malevolence thrown in on top of it. That's what it is. And that happens in human existence. You know, we're constantly somewhere in the flow of creation. The creation-destruction loop is happening all the time, that divine dialogue. But when the destruction part of the loop comes in, there's a tendency to look at it in terms of that's a bad thing when stuff breaks down. But then, you know, if we think about it on a more universal level, like breaking food down in your mouth isn't really a bad thing, right? Or the purification that happened for the ancestors just in the last few minutes, that wasn't really a bad thing. That was a support for them ultimately. But you have to wait for the flip side of the loop, the creative side of the loop, to come forward in order to be able to appreciate the downside of the loop. And because the human nervous system is constructed to experience life in a sequential manner, when a person is caught in the downside, the destructive side of that loop, it's hard to see the constructive side. So there's a tendency at that point, their habits, their triggers that trigger the habitual behavior. There are discordant feelings. These are there are thought forms that have gotten wedged in there and pain bodies that feed off of that negativity that comes out of the destructive side. So all this, thanks for being here. Yeah. So this is clearing it. It's clearing it. It's clearing it. It's clearing it. It's clearing all those triggers and pain bodies and what did I say? Habits, thought forms. I'm just calling them as they're dissolving, as they're leaving. You can see them go. That's happening for ancestors also. We've got the ancestors wide awake now. We got their attention earlier. So it's all, and I'm still seeing a kind of a gathering. It's almost as if in this healing, we've hooked into a kind of a dense spot that's in the collective consciousness, actually, because it's something that affects everyone. It's part of the foundation for the belief that human life is suffering. I would say, is the fact that there are two strokes of the divine dialogue, destructive and constructive, and at the point of the destructive stroke, there's been a kind of a habit in the collective for a long time to bring in that malevolence right there. So just when you thought things couldn't get worse, like a shout out to my dear friends in California who had to go through the terrible fires and then afterwards found that there were a lot of people offering to help who really weren't helpful at all. And so that, that's kind of a good example of that. So I'm still feeling this moving. I'm still feeling a big purification kind of wending its way through the system. And at this point, it seems to be mostly focused in the back of the cranium, in the cerebellum area, in the back of the brain, cerebellum area, right there, because that's the filtration system for the brain. So it's partly, evidently, I am inferring from this perception, that part of the healing for this particular imbalance is to restructure the way we filter our experience. And that is, I would say, probably the most valuable part of the process, because what it means is that when something happens, it's kind of has a destructive look to it, that rather than immediately jumping to the conclusion or the assumption that this is something terrible, one finds the balance point, right? Anytime terrible comes in, dark, bad, yucky, malevolent, terrible, icky, whatever, you're dealing with the x-axis and you go back to center, right? It's a simple answer, but it has a profound effect. So right there, what's happening is balance is stabilizing in the back of the brain, in the cerebellum, as a habit, as a gut reaction to whenever the destructive laws of nature are prevalent. Good job. That made that so easy. Balance in the cerebellum. Okay, we can do this. It comes down to balance in the cerebellum. 4 words. All right. Beautiful. I knew you would love this healing. I was thinking of you. Someone just came in on the chat and they're like, I'm loving this healing. I'm like, yeah, I was thinking of you, man. My darling, my adorable. Yeah, so good. So we touched on low self-esteem for people. We touched on relationships with food and Sanskrit letters and anything else out there, because everything is divinity. So being able to forge and establish a relationship with everything in creation, which is reflective of divinity self-interacting, basically. When you can give your love, this is a picture of a stone. I showed it last night, but for those who are not here, I'm seeing there's green inside this. Oh no, it's just reflecting off the green screen. So this is a stone that my husband gave me years ago, and you can see that it's the same as the stone behind me because I took a picture of it and I put it up there. But you can have relationship with anything, really. You can love it in different ways, honor it, right? I honored it by taking a picture. I took a picture of it and honored it, and then look, it became useful to me. That's nice. Okay, we've got a lot of excited questions coming in here, so let's do this. We're in the question box. Okay, so here's a question. I am so happy to be here with you. Love you so much. Oh, thank you. I love you too. Your love means the world to me, all of you. I can't tell you how special, how precious it is. Just precious. It's like the most valuable thing. I do think I need much healing around 7-year relationship left in January. Both had low self-esteem, allowed myself to be in a situation where partner never wanted me, so was always moving away from me, very painful, trying to release, let go, and love. All right, so The first thing that I'd like to say about this, because romantic relationships, as we talked about yesterday, are the ones that allow us, romantic relationships, just as a review, have the least number of boundaries or limitations in them, right? Because you're intimate with that person, not just verbally intimate, but also in the heart intimate and even physically intimate. So all these levels of intimacy. And then if the relationship goes a long time, as time goes on, it becomes more delicate, more refined, more intense, like that, ideally. So in a romantic relationship, one of the first things is very good to understand that the lover will never love you the way you love yourself exactly. They will never love you exactly the way you love yourself, because they're living in a different physiology. And the different physiology is going to be their filter. And so they can only love you as well as they think, whatever they think you want. You know, because love, let's see, my daughter-in-law's dropped off a book, The Language of Love. Is anybody familiar with that book? Anyway, it's a sweet little book, and I thought it was quite correct in a lot of ways. It talked about how different types of nervous systems, different types of people like different kinds of love better than others. So some people like to be spoken words of kindness, and some people like to get a massage. I mean, everybody likes all the kinds of love. Some people like surprise gifts. Some people like to just have quality time together with their loved one. And the last one was, some people like acts of devotion or kindness. So, you know, either through actions or through words or through, you know, gifts or whatever. So there are these different tendencies. People have different proclivities towards different types of expressions of love. And what will normally happen is that the partner will they will express their love to you in the way that they wish you would express it to them. So if your partner is very physical, they might want to express their love by lots of hugs and kisses. But maybe you're not as physical. Maybe what you really like is downtime. And so, you know, what you really like if something isn't going well is for them to kind of just give you some space. See what I'm saying? Or maybe some people really like gifts. They like to give gifts. They like to receive gifts, like that. Everybody's different. So the first thing that people will sometimes do is try to love their beloved the way they want to be loved. And that doesn't always work. So it's good to determine how the person you're with, like what creates the biggest response for them. You can test it. Try a gift, try a word. And of course, like I said, everybody enjoys combinations of those in different degrees. So, you know, it's going to be unique to each relationship. But that's the first thing. The second thing is, because you know yourself better than anyone will ever know you, your own love for yourself is more valuable to you than anybody else's love. It doesn't matter if it's even a married spouse. It doesn't matter, or a child or whatever. Your love is the love that really, really counts in your world, because you know everything about yourself. And it makes a difference, right? If someone comes up who doesn't know you and says, "Oh, I love you," then you know that they're just loving what they think you are, right? But you know what you really are. So one of the reasons that as humans we like to go into long-term relationships is because we like to be loved by someone who really knows us. And nobody knows you better. So the first thing to do is to cultivate the ability to self-love in a really deep, dramatic, complete, and unhindered way. And that's a lot of what we just create a foundation for that with the ancestors, right? With the last healing, where they were able to self-define in terms of being a more charming, precious, adorable, capable, worthy of being loved person. Remember, there was some suffering of unworthiness, so take care of that. So cultivating the ability to self-love then places you in a position of self-sufficiency. Then you're coming from strength. You don't need anybody to love you. You have love. You are full. You are whole. You are complete. Then whatever the lover gives, they enjoy that process. Because when you give love to someone else, you experience expansion of the heart. So the giver of love is the one who enjoys. So if you're already complete in yourself and you're matched up with someone who you don't really need their love, but their presence gives them an opportunity to be loving to you, then you become the object that allows them to experience flow of their heart and fullness of heart. Does that make sense? People love you because of how you make them feel. How do you make other people feel good about themselves? You give them a structure that allows them to have a flow of their own intelligence, creativity, love, right? So you become adorable. When you're adorable, then people love you. And when they love you, they feel good. Okay. So I hope that answered the question, okay? Oh, and by the way, the healing that would go with that would be a self-love healing, but I've uploaded the self-love healing many times, and you were with me for the last webinar, the lady who asked this question. When we did, we did a really nice little mini self-healing. Yeah, we've got people over here with their hands over their hearts like, yeah, I'm feeling that. Oh, and one lady saying, my heart is imploding with love and gratitude. You are so beautiful, right? The lady who saying this right here, that her heart is imploding with love and gratitude, she's figured it out. She's figured out how to leverage everything in her world as a source of her love. So everywhere she looks, this sweet lady who said that, she sends me pictures of really little tiny flowers up close and little tiny rocks and stuff. And I love them because you guys know how I love nature photos, right? So yes. Oh, thank you. And I don't know if everybody can see the beautiful comment that's just been made here. Is that beautiful answer? Isn't it amazing how that self-love strengthens love in all other areas? Yes, thank you for that comment, that beautiful comment. Okay, back to questions and answers. So yeah, that the lady who just said that her heart was imploding has figured out how, and also the man who said that he gives love to his food and that he loves the Sanskrit letters, that when you figure out that you can give love to like everything in your world, then your heart is like melting all the time. And what that does is it strengthens, stabilizes, and expands the capacity to feel everything that goes along with feeling in love. Increased endorphins, increased hormones that are associated with the love experience, serotonin, right? We love our gut bacteria, and then all the serotonin starts to flow. Beautiful. Beautiful. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. That's what the world is for. We love the world. And what's really happening is the divine being is using us as a vehicle to love divine being's own self, because divine being is all around you in the form of everything in your world. Wow. I didn't know that your question was going to expand into this other question. That's so beautiful. Okay, so here's another question. What about healing for those who had highly abusive mothers or fathers? Yeah, I've been thinking about this one too. This lady who's asking this is a deep thinker, very, very beautiful intellect. I have noticed that when those initial powerful bonds are highly damaged, many people have a long healing journey. They seem to need a tribe more than others. Yes, I agree. That's a beautiful observation. And I mean, as you say it, it just strikes just right. And I hadn't thought of it in that way, that they need a tribe more than other people, but that just is so right on, isn't it? Ooh, I love it. I always try to be careful in the webinars not to like say people's names because I'm trying to protect everyone's anonymity, but I'll just tell you that the lady who is making this point is anyway very brilliant, and she probably wouldn't mind, but anyway, just honoring you. They seem to need a tribe more than others, but they are more afraid of closeness, often more triggered. Yeah. Okay, so the mother-father relationship that each person gets when they come into the physiology is going to be specified for that particular person, for their particular situation. Always when you have dysfunction in a family situation, it's there to support everyone's ability to become very strong. And it's true about people who have long healing journeys associated with those relationships, but I've also seen for people who've had really terrible, really dysfunctional family relationships, that it causes them to cultivate specific strengths. You know, if the dysfunctional relationship is specifically with mother, or specifically with father, or something, or the specific type of crazy that they were, right, will cause that person it'll either break them completely, or it will cause them to become strong in a way which is unusually fabulous. And I think we talked about this a little bit yesterday. Did we, or was it me talking to myself? Oh, I think this was, sorry, this was me planning what I was going to talk to you guys about when I was walking in the forest yesterday. Which is that we're going to look at another axis now, and that's the axis from asleep to awake, right? So I have these kind of 4 basic axes that I use to navigate the ocean of consciousness, so that we can get our attention right in on that exact laser-like beam on that spot that it needs. So I was looking, especially when I was walking and talking with myself and the squirrels, asleep to awake, because that's the one, that is the axis that we as humans have been given the greatest boundary to master. I was looking at the relationship between the human nervous system and the ability for consciousness to awaken. And because the human nervous system is constructed to experience life in a sequential, unfolding manner, then we can't see totality. We can't, at least at the gross, dense level. And we've got techniques to allow us to experience totality. You know, the nervous system becomes flexible so that you can experience wholeness or totality, the silent source of being at the same time as being engaged in activity. And that it's like a cultivation. Again, over the long course of time, that happens. Practice, or sometimes a soul comes in, they've practiced already past lifetimes, so they come in already nearly there. But the point about that is that when you get close, when you get up to a more of a mastery level, then the challenges get bigger. The challenges get harder. And I was thinking when I was talking of the example of playing my flute that I played since I was a child. I've played the flute. So for me to play, I have little students that come in and I teach them the scale. This is do, re, mi, fa, so slow, you know, and then they miss a note, you know, or something. But for me, that doesn't happen. For me to play do, re, mi, fa, so is like nothing. So what I do is I have to use my creativity to find new, horribly harder ways to play my scales in order to make it even slightly interesting. And what that does is it gives me the opportunity to go in like really like mastering it, you know? So sometimes I'll play scales for an hour and a half. And you think, God, that would be so boring to play scale. And my beginners would be like, oh God, that would be torture. But you know, because there are all these variations, each one is fascinating in its own way. And that is the fundamental of music. So owning the fundamental. So here we are back here is what the soul does when it comes into a lifetime where it's got dysfunctional parents, particularly if it's parents and particularly if it's mother, then that gives rise to a condition that forces that individual to become very creative and intelligent very fast. And I feel that a soul will sometimes choose that because they have already had the experience of having a very functional mother. They've already had lifetimes where they can play do, re, mi, fa, so. So that's fine. Now they need to play, you know, do, mi, re, fa, da, 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 da. Anyway, I don't verbalize when I play. I just finger braid. Anyway, anyway, so I would say that would be an explanation for why a person comes in with abusive mothers and fathers. And then the outcome of it is that in that lifetime, they get a chance to, and it's usually going to be something that they plan to explore for the whole lifetime. They get a chance to really explore how the inner being strengthens itself. Even as a child, even with a not fully ripened nervous system, how they cultivate the ability to ninja their way around those dysfunctions. And it makes them hypersensitive to what doesn't work. And it's brilliant. It's brilliant. And they seem to, God, I love your point about how they seem to need a tribe. That's awesome. We've got a few more questions coming. With regards to the tribe, I just have to make a comment on it because it's so fascinating to me, because I hadn't really quite thought of that before, but it's so cool. And when I make a comment, I understand it. And why do I hold these webinars? You thought I was holding it for you guys? No. Oh, are you kidding me? No, I love you, but I do it because, like, this idea is a new idea to me, right? And I'm up here speaking, but I'm not just speaking. This instrument, this physiology, is the mirror of our collective physiology, which means your intelligence, your perspective, your angle of looking at this point enhances my ability to see it more clearly, which is exactly what happens in a tribal situation, right? And so what they've done is, because the mother-father relationship is broken, they realize that on a one-on-one level, things aren't working. So in order to learn what I need to learn, in order to align myself with the archetypal relationship of myself with father or myself with mother, then, or brother, or whoever it is, what I do is then I create a system where I know a lot of people, all who fulfill some aspect or some feature of that relationship. And then I can look in and align with the best piece of that one, and the best piece of that one, and the best piece of that one. So what they're doing is they're reconstructing out of a collective the very best possible archetypal template, you could say, for their relationship with mother or father. And then as they do that, that relationship ultimately will transfer over to the collective. I mean, to like everything, like when they're loving and chewing their food, or when they're, you know, taking a walk outside and just loving the temperature or the clouds or their clothes or whatever it is. All right. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak it, because as I speak it, I understand it better too. So we're learning together. And boy, I really appreciate that. Okay, so here's a question from Croatia. How can we know that our ancestors are good wherever they are? Oh, like that they're okay. So basically what this lady's asking is that she loves her ancestors, she's concerned about them, and she wants to know they're okay. So that's a great question. Yesterday we talked a little bit about how to access the sacred space where you and your ancestors reside. And this sacred space, it again breaks down along the axis of large to small, because there's a whole archive of ancestors. And all this I'm speaking is at the causal level. If we want to go on this, we're all familiar with our dense to subtle. So that's at the finest manifest level of the self, the causal level. We can find the collective soul of our ancestry, and it resides in our bodies at the level of the DNA. So we're also looking at the big to small axis, right? Because we go right down into the molecular level of the physiology. There you find them. They're physically, they are a part of you as your DNA. So I find that easiest way to access any sacred garden of the heart, whether it's somebody who's alive and well right now that you can go over and knock on their door and visit, or whether it's someone like an ancestor who's passed away, easiest portal is through the heart area, because that's where we're speaking a level of universal, that's a universal communication, and no hidden agendas, no preconceived ideas, assumptions, expectations, any of that stuff. From the heart, it's all very authentic and it's very true. So it's the easiest way to kind of get into the true core of that relationship, that sacred garden. So there's a big sacred garden for all the ancestors, our ancestral archive. And my experience is the appropriate approach to the ancestral archive is one of reverence and gratitude and love. But reverence and gratitude almost first before love, because remember, they love themselves first, right? They don't need your love. They don't really need it. Ideally, they love themselves. If that comes, fine. It's nice for you to feel loving for them. But the important thing is that they love themselves. But when you come with reverence and gratitude, it uplifts their own ability to love themselves better. So we go in with reverence and gratitude, and then if you have concerns over specific relatives, like say your grandmother or your great-grandfather or somebody like that, even aunts, uncles, and cousins can be found through that connection, then what you want to do is you want to isolate out your specific relationship with that individual. And what you'll find is that if you start at the level of the heart, that the information that comes to you will come in as a feeling. You'll get a feeling about that person. Like, I'm just going to use an example. I'm feeling into my paternal grandmother right now. I remember what she looked like. And I'm inviting her. First thing is bowing down at her feet in reverence and gratitude for what she contributed to my life, without which none of this would be. So it's like, she deserves that level of recognition and gratitude. And then, based on that, then I can give her my love. And then I can ask her, so how are you? Like, how are things going? And is there anything that can be done to support and uplift your situation? And she's saying that all the thoughts and feelings of everyone around, everyone who's in the living body right now, those thoughts and feelings become features of her environment. They become objects in her world. They become parts of her reality. So she's saying to me, I'm just doing a read right now with my paternal grandmother, whose name is Grace, by the way. She's saying to me that one of the things that she's aiming at right now is how to enhance or expand the quality of synchronicity in her reality. Because what she's finding where she is, not in the body, is that the more synchronous her environment is, the more orderly it is. So she's basically, what she's saying is that in her environment, the impulses that come into her space that aren't, that are kind of like more connected to the destructive laws of nature, right? They come in as entropy, and she experiences them as disorder in her world. And so, and it's often we've talked about, or I use the word chaos to describe that destructive law of nature. So she's saying that what she'd like is if it could be more orderly, because she feels like she'd like to, move into a lighter space, a cleaner, more orderly space. And I totally support her in that, because the more orderly it is for her, the easier it is for me to access my inheritance from that side of the family, which is not financial inheritance. What I inherited from that side of the family is intelligence. And that's super useful to me. So, and at this point, as I'm supporting her, increasing synchronicity in her space and orderliness, that also helps increase that in my space. And that's beautiful, because when everything flows in a synchronous manner, it's like when everything lines up, like I was going to the dressmaker the other day, and I thought, well, I'm going for a walk anyway. I'll just drop in and see when I can bring my daughter in for a fitting. And I just dropped in randomly, and she said, oh, I'm so glad to see you. She said, I've been trying to reach you by phone this morning, and she didn't have my number. She had my daughter's number, so she wasn't reaching me. And I just happened, like, it wasn't like I was thinking, oh, she's trying to reach me. I was like, I'm going for a walk. This is easy. I need to do this. I'll just show up, and she needed me for something completely different, but it just fit so neatly. It was and guess what? The dress came together and it fit so neatly. So, it's like all the little pieces were fitting together neatly, and then it just allowed the whole thing to just unfurl in this lovely, orderly manner. So, and there again are the blessings. Now I look back at that situation, I say, oh, that was my paternal grandmother. That was her who structured that little thing so that I could see it, so that it would unfurl in my reality as a feature of my world. We share. We are sharing this. I'm saying that to her. I'm saying that to her. But we all share. We all of you share with your ancestors these particular types of interactions. When that happened to me, now I look back on it, I realize the feeling of my grandmother's personality was there at that time. So clear. Now that I think back, I can see it clearly. But at the time, I was more focused on just, what was going on with the needs of the moment. Okay, so thank you for that amazing question. Okay, so here's another question. What you just said is a great lead-in, or maybe even the answer to my question, which is, to what extent are relationship challenges we have with others simply a mirror of our relationship with our own self, big S, or being, big B? Good question. So this question also ties into the healing process, because a lot of times people are asking the question, why is my body, which is supposed to be my friend, it's like it's the vehicle that I'm going around in, why is it not being happy? Why is it making something that doesn't work? And so the answer is that the body, the being, the environment, the people around us, it's all divine being talking to itself, right? But the body's super wise, and it wants you to evolve. It wants your consciousness to expand in such a way to allow you to be a more precise reflection of divinity. And same with relationships that are dysfunctional. Right, you're referring to the dysfunctional relationship question. That what happens is we're given the task as humans. The purpose of human is to be the representative of expansion of consciousness for the divine. Okay, so that's a kind of I'm using that as a fundamental. Why? I've kind of been over this a little bit in previous webinars, but divine being is already full expanded. It knows everything, it is everything, it does everything, it is everywhere. It's not missing anything except one thing. It's missing the experience of expanding because it's already expanded. So what it does is it makes human, and makes human with its little nervous system that has these boundaries and limitations that make the experience of expansion of consciousness, like it puts like little barriers in there so that we have to go through this loopy process to expand our consciousness. And that loop of destruction, creation, destruction, creation. So this is what we do. This is the glory of the status of human in the universe, is that we represent the expansion of consciousness. And it's honorable, and it's amazing, and it's been going on for over 100,000 years. And it's like, wow, like that's something. That's giving something of real value back to the Creator, is that we can do this thing. And the Creator can enter into this creation, and it can feel what it's like to have a surprise birthday party just for you, or it can feel what it's like to eat some food you never ate before, or, like all these things. This is what the Creator is missing. So it's like we're fulfilling this super important, like powerful position in the universe, that we have the particular type of nervous system that causes us to break it down and experience it one piece at a time. Okay, so then what happens is, in relationships that are challenged, those reflect the boundaries. And when a person comes into their lifetime, there's a general idea or sense, you kind of know ahead, like, okay, I have these certain lessons I want to learn, like the children with the dysfunctional parents, they know that they've become strong in previous lifetime. They've been good parents, and they've had good parents, and they've been in communities where parents knew how to function. They can do it. They can do the basic parent thing. Now they need to challenge themselves to have a parental relationship which is dysfunctional, in order to then, like, okay, but then how do I become a good parent even if I didn't have a good parent? I have a girlfriend who did that. She was so, oh gosh, she grew out of a bad home life, alcoholic father and mother who ended up in an insane asylum. She grew out of that so beautifully. It's a woman who has a level of strength that's like superhuman. She has a superhuman level of strength because of it. It's very special. So yeah, we choose those challenges. Okay, so we start at the beginning. Okay, I'm going to have this life and I'm going to face this lesson, and then this lesson I'm going to work on after that, this lesson, after that, this lesson. But so what happens is the body's super smart, and it knows better than to make all of your lessons come to you all at once. It knows to bring them to you in a sequential unfoldment, which is the right order, ideally. They come to you in an order which allows each lesson to build on the previous lesson. So what that means is that unless you're dead, which I think all of us are quite alive. No, oh, we do have our ancestors. Oh, but anyway, if you're alive, it means that you still have lessons ahead. And those lessons need to be like harbored in a safe space until you're ready for them. So what happens with those lessons is they get kind of like put on ice, so to say, so you can just deal with the one that's at the present moment. And what that does is it causes the whole system to create a kind of habit of, I'm not looking at that lesson yet. I'm not going to cross that bridge yet. So it creates like a kind of a little barrier or a veil. To me, it reminds me kind of like a veil that's over the upcoming challenge. And what that means is when you finish up your lessons and you come up to that lesson, there's going to be this little veil, little barrier that you have to sort of bust through in order to get to the lesson. And that veil represents the dragon who sits at the gates of hell. Before you go in and face before the hero, the archetypal hero goes in and faces his greatest challenge, and he has to face the thing that he fears the most, first he's got to kill a dragon. So anyway, so a lot of times in relationships with people, that little veil, once you unhook that, then you can get in and do the real work with the other person. So that's, in my experience, that's what stands between having a challenging relationship with someone and being able to together work in like a tribe. You both go in together saying, this is a problem, but somehow we're smart and we can work it out. If you can get past the dragon first. So recognize the dragon for what it is and just toss it out, and then get in and do the work with the person. And actually doing work with a person can be a lot of fun. Working out the details. You both learn stuff. It's beautiful. Okay, we're almost out of time, but we have time for this one more question. So this lady says she's so grateful and she's so happy to be here. And can you do a healing for habits of self-harm? Right, so that would mean any kind of addictive behaviors, self-mutilation, even we could say sometimes, yeah, sometimes even, like using
accident proneness.
Oh, thank you. Yes, accident proneness. Self-criticism, right. She's got in here skin picking, cutting, actions that hurt the body. But yeah, self-criticism, thank you. So, what did you say?
I said accident prone.
Accident prone, right. Because a lot of times when a person experiences being accident prone, they're kind of like, oh, well, that's not really me, but it really is. So all of these fall into a category that I call avoiding stepping out onto the hero's journey. So there's this flow, right? Divine being speaks to itself through the constructive and destructive laws of nature. And the constructive and destructive laws of nature balance each other, like in the yin-yang symbol. But and we kind of did a little bit of healing for this earlier. Thank goodness, thanks to your ancestors, thanks to you being here. That there's a tendency, there were habits over the long course of time to be a little resistant to facing challenges. And this is speaking of tribes, speaking of our collective, our larger collective society, the Western world in particular, orients itself. There's a huge market, billion-dollar market that's built up around supporting people's ability to escape dealing with their problems, right? And it's multifaceted. And all these self-destructive tendencies fall into that category. That it's like, rather than going and dealing with the real problem that I really need to deal with, I'm just gonna like get lost in a little space. And it can happen, like I found when I first started working on my business, I have to be very careful to prioritize my work, because it's easy to sit down in front of my email account and just answer emails. They're coming in, they're going out. They're coming in, they're going out. Each time I answer an email, I get a little dopaminergic flush, right? Oh, I answered that one, Well, yay, I answered that email, one after another. But the thing is that I also have to stay up on my reports. And the reports are very important, because the reports are where I have made a commitment to people to provide a particular service. I haven't made, with the emails, for the most part, I haven't made any promises. You might have an assumption that, or an expectation, well, I'm going to send her an email, can I make a private appointment? She's going to answer me back, which of course I would. But the point is that with the people that have paid in for, and you guys paying in for, like, what if I didn't show up this morning? I thought, oh, I'm not going to do the webinar, I'm just going to answer emails instead. No, you can't do that. So there's this matter of prioritizing. And what happens for a lot of people is that the smaller demons are easier to take out. So you've got a big challenge up there. It's the one you're kind of like worried about doing. And you're like, well, I don't really want to do that big challenge because it's too hard. So I'm just going to do this little challenge over here instead. So what happens is, it's a kind of way of escaping. It's like not a full out, oh, I'm simply not going to face my challenges at all. It's kind of like, I'm just going to face the little ones because they're accessible. And so it creates the same effect in the physiology. And this comes back to your point. What did you say? Self-criticism, right. Thank you. Thanks for being like my archive over here, archive of words. This comes back to self-criticism, because if a person lives their life in a way that the purpose of life is to get drunk, or the purpose of life is to get stoned, is like, that's the aim. The reason I'm drinking is because I want to get drunk. Like, that's my big goal for the day. Oh, look, I achieved my goal, something, whatever. You see what I'm saying? Then what happens over the long course of time is that the individual becomes very dispassionate about their life. In the long run, one ends up in their later part of their life feeling just angry and resentful and hurt and unhappy, and it doesn't give rise to a quality of life. See, it's hard either way. If you face your challenges, that's not easy. But if you don't face your challenges, that's not easy now, and that's not easy in the future. If you face your challenges, that's not easy now, but it pays off in the future, right? But if you don't face your challenges, it's not easy now and not easy then. So the deal is you don't get a choice to do easy. Easy's not a choice. Facing the challenges, but you do have a choice of what kind of poison you want. Do you want something that you're doing now that's going to result in this great expansion and blossoming of meaningfulness in life, of value of life, or do you want to just deteriorate? So I encourage everyone, if you have a moment, even a second, to do something, look around and find something valuable to do. If it seems like too much to take on the huge dragon, then start small, but know that you're working up to that dragon. Don't just get caught in the small. Continue to work up to the big achievements. And one of my dear friends is saying she feels honored to be a member of the tribe. I feel honored to be a member of the tribe too. Thank you. It wouldn't be the same without you. Oh, lots of people are raising their hands. There's a thing, there's a little button on the thing where people can raise their hands. You guys are so sweet. Yay, yay. You guys are the best. So, and one lady shared a link, which we will put. Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it. I just would like to honor her that she shared a link to self-identity through Ho'oponopono. So that sounds like Ho'oponopono done for one's own self, which is beautiful. So I just would like to say that we will include this link in the follow-up email that goes out to everyone. You'll get today's recording and yesterday's recording. So you get to see we lay the foundation and then all of today's work. And we've already come to our hour, but I would like to thank everyone for being here as we have a beautiful, beautiful Sunday. And for those of you who are in Europe, have a deep, glorious rest tonight. May you sleep with, dream with the angels, and be washed in the light of your own love. Thank you all for being with me. I love you all dearly. See you soon. Bye.